In the previous lesson, we learned how to set up high DPI or Retina display support for our base graphics and our base scene by setting the resolution on the renderer by using device pixel ratio. We also updated our viewport to make this render correctly on those high DPI devices. In this lesson, we are going to set up our sprite graphics to have multiple resolutions and work seamlessly across your different display types. So the first step we want to do is actually set up those graphics. We're going to go ahead and jump into Photoshop to work on that. So as you can see, I've already loaded up our source graphics for our images, our two rocks, and also a bomb that we will be utilizing in a future lesson. So quite simply, we can just move our images into place, a very basic sprite sheet. We want to make sure we leave some space in between the images, just a decent amount of space, nothing in particular, just to make sure they don't overlap and that we can easily define their space when we need it. So that looks about good. One of the nice new features in Photoshop CC is the alignment features. You can see those lines. We can actually very simply now get the exact same distance between each image, and as you can see, 47 pixels there. Again, that distance really doesn't matter, especially with such a small sprite sheet. Now let's go ahead and grab the crop tool. We don't need all of this empty space. One thing to keep in mind when you're setting up your sprite sheets, which does sometimes make it a little trickier, is that to allow the GPU to work as efficiently as possible, we need to have even dimensions for everything, including the divisions. So let's press Command Option C. This will open up the canvas size editor. And we can go ahead and as you'll notice, it's 915 there. Let's go ahead and make that 916. Another thing you need to think about is will these numbers divide to be even as well? Obviously some simple math, but when you're dealing with a lot of these, it's often handy to use a simple calculator. I like to use Alfred. Control space opens up Alfred. Well, it changed our context there, but 916 divided by 2, of course, 458. It is even. And then let's go ahead and change this to 300. That gives us an even result as well. Okay, so we have our base sprite. We can go ahead and save this now. Command Option Shift S gives us save for web. We'll go ahead and save it as a PNG. And we'll name it sprite, but then we want to go ahead and add @2x. This is pretty standard for handling high DPI graphics. This is how it's done with Apple, Android, so on and so forth. This is also how Pixie.js handles these images internally. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now all we need to do to create our normal sprite image is Command Option I, and then we can just have it. Okay, and again, those numbers are even. That just is a little optimization for the GPU. It's going to give us a little bit better performance, which will be certainly more important on those mobile devices. So again, Command Option Shift S, and we will save this again as a PNG, this time as simply sprite.png. Okay, so we now have our sprite images, both for regular and high DPI. Let's jump back in our code. Remember, Command R lets us go to our method. We're going to go down to random rocks, and we need to rewrite how our rock image gets set up. So let's go ahead and just get rid of that. That's going to change. Let's first set up an image source, and so to do that, pixie.texture.fromImage. And let's load in our sprite. Now remember, we've got both normal sprite and 2x. So let us detect what that is. We'll simply, again, use window.device pixel ratio. If that's greater than 1, then let's go ahead, let's go ahead and add at to x. Otherwise, that name is good. Okay, and I missed an equal sign there. That's generally important in JavaScript or any language. Okay, now we want to set up the texture. We're actually going to have something in between there, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so new pixie.texture. We'll pass in our image, and then we'll pass in what we're calling a frame. So let's just set up the scaffolding for that. Now, if you remember, we were just randomly selecting a stone to display. So let's use the same calculation, mat.random, if it's greater than 0.5, otherwise that. So these are going to be our frames. These are the definitions of where the image is defined within our sprite image. And we'll get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and use multiple cursors. Actually, okay, we select the one, hold down Command, click up here. Okay, so we'll define an X, a Y, a width, and a height. Okay, and then we need to set up our rock as well, which will be new pixie sprite, and we just pass in the texture. Okay, so now how do we get these values? Well, there's a variety of methods of doing that. You could do it straight in Photoshop. My favorite tool is a web-based one called SpriteCow. It's just spritecow.com. Really convenient, really easy to use. Let's go ahead and open our base sprite. It loads the image in, and then you can simply click on your different textures. It will highlight exactly the containing frame around that image, and so we can get the values that we need. 0, 0, 157, and 150. Okay, so these are our X, Y, 157, and 150. However, red flag, 157, that is an odd number. But since we gave ourselves plenty of empty space on the edges, we can just simply make that 158, and our GPU is going to think is for it later. Let's go ahead and get our second stone here. This is showing for CSS. In this case, we just want the positive value, 180, 0, 152, 150. Okay, 152, 150. All right, so now that has defined our sprites. Again, we'll be coming back to the bomb later. Another thing that we can do is we will want to go ahead and multiply these by the device pixel ratio. So let's just go ahead and come in here. Obviously, those are going to stay 0. So we'll just add it to these ones that have values. Again, multiple cursors by holding Command. There we go. And again, just to be safe, let's have that fall back to 1. All right. So we now have our sprites defined. We now have our new texture defined. Let's go ahead and load that up again in our iOS simulator here. I'm going to go ahead and reload that. And we can begin the game. Again, you can see that the text is all rendering nice and smoothly. And here are the images, the sprites. As you can see, they're still loading the same size. And it's nice and crisp. We can also load it in the browser. Oops. ss.dev. Everything's still looking like it was before. Again, it's rendering on a normal DPI. This is using the standard graphics now. So, in this lesson, we've learned how to set up our support for sprite images, for support on normal displays, as well as on high DPI displays. In the upcoming lesson, we'll be looking at how to use various device-specific, mainly mobile-specific sensors to further improve our user experience and gameplay.